Forest. Covering 20% of all land on Earth, they are by far the dominant terrestrial biome on the planet, with the majority of both plant and animal species residing within forested areas. Forests create highly productive lands with diverse ecosystems and help to stabilize our climate by producing oxygen and sequestering carbon dioxide. It should suffice to say that forests are among the most important natural features on our planet, and life on Earth wouldn't be the same without them. Unfortunately, this tremendous value has been overlooked in the past centuries as our world's forests have diminished to nearly half the size they once were. Before the Industrial Revolution, forests covered a total area of 60 million square kilometers of the surface of the Earth, which is 40% of all the land surface on the planet. But around the year 1850, as the human population exploded and the demand for space and resources skyrocketed, vast portions of the land were cleared for use in agriculture, human habitation, and resource extraction. Of the 60 million square kilometers of forest that covered the Earth not too long ago, only about 30 million square kilometers remain, and every year around 73,000 square kilometers of forest is lost. So, in honor of some of the Earth's most important and threatened habitat, let's take a look at the 10 largest forests on Earth. Before we start though, I just want to make a quick distinction between a forest and a woodland. To most people, they're synonymous, but there is an actual difference between the two words. Though slightly arbitrary, a woodland is an area with less than half of the ground covered by woody vegetation, like short trees and shrubs, while forests are a lot more dense, typically with taller trees and more than 50% of the ground covered by vegetation. Instead, woodlands are most commonly seen as a transition area between forests and grassland biomes. This definition means most Mediterranean and developed areas won't make it onto this list, as they qualify as woodlands and not true forests. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get started. Number 10 is the Primorye coniferous forest in Russia's far east subject of Primorsky Krai. Being the largest country on Earth, Russia is going to hold a couple of the world's largest forests, and you should expect to see it on this list again. But here, in the Primorye forest, an impressive amount of diversity is to be found, especially when compared to other conifer forests of Russia. This is most likely a result of the fact that this land was avoided by glaciation in the past few ice ages, whereas lands further north became heavily glaciated within the past few thousand years, which prevented the diversification that occurred further south. Living here is the Ussuri black bear, Manchurian sika deer, and an impressive array of great cats, including the Amur leopard, the Eurasian lynx, and the Siberian tiger, where the Primorye forest is actually the last refuge of the extremely endangered tiger, with a maximum population of only around 540 individuals, though fortunately has been stable and increasing since 2005 when the population was only 393. This is also the only place on Earth where bears, tigers, and leopards coexist. This forest is also some of the last habitat for Blakiston's fish owl, the largest owl on Earth. Aside from the Korean pines and Manchurian firs that make up most of the forest, many plants here are relict species found nowhere else on Earth, including several species of fern and lotus plants. Another result of the great diversity found here is that many plants in the Primorye forest also offer medicinal benefits, and research is continually being conducted in this area. Due to its proximity to the Pacific Ocean, the climate here also qualifies as a temperate rainforest, although temperatures vary wildly based on the season, as during the summer nearly tropical conditions persist, while Arctic conditions exist throughout winter. Due to the Primorye's remote location and impressive conservation efforts under the Soviet Union, it has remained almost entirely intact over the years. Only recently have commercial operations started to expand as Russia enters economic hardships. Funding for conservation has fallen from the federal government down to more regional powers, and as a result, the forest is less protected now. However, the area still receives good funding from the international community, and funnily enough, the United States is the greatest donator of funds to help in the preservation of these lands. As a result of these efforts, the Primorye forest is 130,000 square kilometers and consists mostly of old-growth forest. This is an impressively preserved forest, and sadly more of an exception to the rule for this list, especially for the next forest. Number 9 is the Burmese tropical rainforest in the modern country of Myanmar. What was once part of the greater Southeast Asian rainforest has sadly now receded into just a few pockets of forest between settlements. This was some of the oldest rainforests on Earth, as the climate here has remained virtually constant for around 140 million years, in part due to its proximity to the coast of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, and its location near the equator. As ice encroached from the North and South poles, many species from the surrounding lands came to this area for refuge, and as a result, the forest became highly diverse over the years, and today the area area hosts a wide variety of animals, such as the Asian elephant, Bengal tiger, and the Sunda pangolin, and is especially rich in primate species such as lemurs, macaques, and gibbons, many of which live their entire lives in the canopy, never venturing to the forest floor. Dominant trees here are in the Dipterocarpaceae family, which are emergent trees with the characteristics of being tall and skinny with leaves only at the top. Sadly, these qualities make the trees attractive to loggers for their suitable use in construction. And as I mentioned earlier, this forest used to be part of a far larger ecosystem, and today it continues to shrink due to both legal and illegal logging operations. Myanmar also used to be a highly isolated country which helped protect its forests, but as the nation begins to interact with its neighbors and open itself up to foreign investment, it is likely that the forest becomes burdened with greater reductions in the future. Unless serious conservation efforts are started soon, all of what was once the Great Southeast Asian Rainforest on mainland Asia could be gone in our lifetime. As it stands now, the Burmese rainforest is 233,000 square kilometers, which is much larger than the last entry on this list, but nothing compared to what it once was. Number 8 is the Valdivian temperate rainforest. Located in Chile and Argentina, it's not the first rainforest people consider when thinking about South America, but it's still rather impressive. The Valdivian is one of the newest forests on Earth, with the land where it now grows having been completely covered by the Patagonian ice sheets up until around 17,000 years ago. That means this forest hasn't even existed for all of human history. Despite having been covered by glaciers, most of the forest's diversity was preserved in the northern reaches of the forest. And being a vertically arranged forest, there's a good deal of variation in climate and ecosystem type as you change latitudes. In the north is a climate similar to the Mediterranean, which is relatively dry and warm, and the trees are mostly deciduous, meaning they lose their leaves every year, which is another thing that's uncommon in South America. As you move south, the moisture level increases and true temperate rainforests emerge. This is what most of the Valdivian forest consists of. But then further south, the elevation increases and you get a more alpine forest consisting mostly of conifers, similar to the forests of New Zealand. And for some reason, many of the animals found here are quite small, including the kolokolo possum, the pudu, the world's smallest deer, and the codcod, the smallest wildcat in the Americas. Trees here mostly belong to the Nothofagus, the Fitzroya, or bamboo families. Today, little of the Valdivian is protected, and it's currently being logged extensively to use the rich timber. And in the place of the important big trees which take many years to grow are smaller, faster-growing tree species such as eucalyptus, which don't do nearly as good of a job in preserving the habitat here. Despite this threat, however, the Valdivian comes in at around 248,000 square kilometers. Number 7 is the Borneo tropical rainforest. This also used to be included in the Southeast Asian rainforest, but has since become isolated into its own ecosystem, located on the third largest island on Earth. Like the Burmese rainforest, the Borneo rainforest is also some of the oldest on Earth, at around 140 million years old. As a result, this area hosts an abundance of biodiversity and endemic species, featuring 10,000 plant species, which includes over 2,000 species of orchid alone. Perhaps the most interesting orchid species found here are the 5 types of Rafflesia flowers, known for smelling strongly of rotting flesh to attract flies for pollination. Within this group of flowers is Rafflesia arnoldii, the largest single flower on the planet, which comes in at roughly a meter in diameter. As for animals, many extremely endangered species call Borneo home. The Sumatran rhinoceros, known for having 2 horns, is the rarest species of rhino to exist, with only about 275 still alive in the wild. Also found here are the critically endangered Bornean orangutan, which are hunted and either captured for sale as pets or killed for their meat. All animals here also suffer from habitat loss, as more of the forest is converted to plantations for rubber and palm oil. And while there are some large nature preserves on the island, such as the Kayan Mentarang National Park and the Bitang Karahun National Park, much of the forest is still in danger of further reductions. Currently, the rainforest of Borneo is around 290,000 square kilometers, but as this forest accounts for nearly half of the tropical timber trade, it will likely continue to diminish in size unless more is done. Number 6 is right beside Borneo and very similar in a lot of ways, and that is the tropical rainforest of New Guinea, on the second largest island on Earth. But unlike Borneo, the rainforests of New Guinea are mostly preserved, with only the southern regions of the island being developed to any extent. This rainforest can be seen as the largest and greatest bastion of the Southeast Asian rainforest. Here, between 5 and 10% of all the species on Earth reside, roughly equal to all the species found in Australia. And despite being geographically close to Borneo at only 1,300 kilometers away, the animals of New Guinea are more common to those of Australia, as the New Guinean landmass is actually part of the Australian continental plate, and the two lands were once joined into a single continent called Sahul. Species found here include marsupials like tree kangaroos and wallabies, as well as monitor lizards and the Reggiana bird of paradise. However, much of the island remains unexplored, and New Guinea represents some of the greatest opportunities for discovering new species. And on top of being extremely biodiverse, there's also a thriving tribal culture on the island, hosting almost 1,000 different tribes and almost the same number of languages, making the island also the most linguistically diverse place on the planet. And of these tribes, an estimated 44 have remained uncontacted by outsiders to this day. Due to the roughness of the land and the low populations hosted here, the rainforest of New Guinea has remained virtually intact at 545,000 square kilometers. Okay, we're halfway through this list and we're beginning to reach the truly massive forests of Earth. At number 5, we have the Congo tropical rainforest. And like its name suggests, the Congo rainforest closely surrounds the Congo River, but also spans into 7 other African nations. It is here in this forest that many iconic African animals live, including some of the world's largest primates, like chimpanzees, gorillas, and bonobos, as well as other ginormous animals like hippopotamus and African elephants, which is the biggest land animal on Earth. Sadly, there are high rates of poaching and theft of animals for international trade here, and many animals need armed guards to remain undisturbed. Like New Guinea, there's also a good amount of indigenous human habitation here without causing degradation to the forest. Tribes here include the Baaka, the Baumbuti, the Efi people, and around 150 more. And many of these people have been classified as a race known as Pygmy, which are distinct from surrounding Africans, and are known for being far shorter than average heights. Although the forest is not very diverse, having a biodiversity lower than any other forest mentioned on this list so far, it is extremely dense and difficult to navigate. It was the inspiration for Joseph Conrad's famous book, Heart of Darkness, and is seldom traversed by people who do not live here. As a result, the Congo rainforest has also remained roughly intact through industrialization, and in fact it has some of the lowest deforestation rates of any major world rainforest. However, this area is also very rich in resources such as oil, diamonds, and gold, and the rainforest lies within some of the poorest countries on Earth. Because of this, the rainforest may soon face new threats of development and resource extraction, and in the future more will need to be done to ensure the protection of these lands. Still, the Congo rainforest remains the second largest rainforest on Earth at 1,780,000 square kilometers. The next 3 forests were all once part of a single continuous band around the Earth, much like how the Burmese, Borneo, and New Guinea forests were all part of the Southeast Asian rainforest. But unlike it, this forest has become broken up not because of human encroachment, but rather because of changing sea levels and climate. The 4th, 3rd, and 2nd largest forests on Earth, respectively, are the Scandinavian Russian taiga, the East Siberian taiga, and the Canadian boreal forest, collectively called taiga, and they constitute the largest biome on Earth outside of the oceans. While the Scandinavian taiga is the smallest of the 3, it's still the largest biome of Europe, and one of the last true wildernesses to be found on the continent. Here, the trees are an equal mix of spruce, pines, and birch. In the eastern Siberian taiga, also found almost entirely within the borders of Russia, the forest is largely dominated by larch trees. And while the Canadian boreal forest stretches from Alaska to Quebec, it consists mostly of spruce trees. The fauna found in all 3 of these forests is also pretty similar, where you'll find moose, reindeer, black, brown, Asiatic, and polar bears, wood bison, Canadian and Eurasian lynx, foxes, wolves, wolverines, just a bunch of different salamanders and toads, and most impactful out of them all, beavers. Despite their size though, the taiga forests are fairly poor in terms of biodiversity, and this can be attributed to the most recent ice ages, as all these lands were covered by glaciers as recently as 2.6 million years ago during the Pleistocene epoch. Therefore, species here haven't had the same amount of time as tropical species to specialize and speciate. Among the forests on this list, the taiga definitely has the most harsh climate conditions, as the taiga hugs the Arctic Circle and several months out of the year are spent under several feet of snow. At times, the taiga can even become colder than the tundra, and the coldest temperature ever recorded in the northern hemisphere at -68 degrees Celsius was in the Russian taiga, in the town of Oymyakon. Taiga forests are also very important when talking about the climate, as these forests sequester more carbon out of the atmosphere than all of the tropical and temperate forests combined. Conservation of these areas in the past has been successful, as the Soviet Union put harsh restrictions on the use of their taiga. But that has begun to change, again due to Russia's recent economic downturn. Entrepreneurs from China have begun to look to Siberia to fuel the huge demand for timber in their country, and most of the forests of Canada are unprotected and open for harvesting as well, with only around 8% of the forest here protected by the government. But there are regulations to at least make sure companies rehabilitate the land once they've used it. Together, this single biome and these 3 forests account for 30% of the Earth's total forests, and take 3 of the top 4 places on this list, with the Scandinavian Russian taiga at 2,156,000 square kilometers, the East Siberian taiga at 3,900,000 square kilometers, and the Canadian Boreal forest on top, at a whopping 4,200,000 square kilometers. And while all 3 are impressive, there's still one more forest that beats them all. At number 1, you've probably guessed it by now, is the Amazon tropical rainforest. Covering land in 9 nations, the Amazon represents more than half of the world's remaining rainforest. Not only is the Amazon the world's largest rainforest, it's also the most biodiverse, with 1 in 10 species on the planet existing here and nowhere else, including 1 in 5 bird species on Earth, and even 1 in 5 fish species on the planet live within the Amazon River network. Together, the Amazon is the world's largest collection of plants and animals, with 16,000 species of tree alone, and current estimates project there to be 390 billion trees to exist within the forest. Animals found here include the jaguar, the anaconda, anteaters, spider monkeys, poison dart frogs, iguanas, macaws, toucans, parakeets, the brown-throated sloth, and so many more. There are many theories as to why this region is so dense with endemic species found nowhere else on Earth, and most have to do with the age of the Amazon rainforest itself, which is around 55 million years old. In the past, rainforest encompassed nearly all of North and South America, and many different species spread across these different lands. But as the climate cooled during the Eocene epoch, something I covered in great detail in my last video, the forest shrank to where it is now, and all the species contained within either had to retreat or die off. Currently, we are seeing the further shrinking of the Amazon rainforest, not due to the climate, but as a result of human interaction, and the Amazon has already lost 20% of its area, or nearly 800,000 square kilometers. That's more area than the Primordier, Burmese, and Valdivian forests combined. Most of the forest being cleared is to make room for cattle pastures or soy farming, but once cleared of its forest, the Amazonian soil quickly loses its fertility, and in order to continue to grow crops here, farmers will continually burn and clear new sections of land, leaving the old ones to wither. And now, the deforestation of the Amazon can even be seen from space. What has been done to sections of the Amazon has been deemed by some as ecocide. To make things even worse, as more forest is cleared, moisture given off by evapotranspiration diminishes, and fewer inches of overall rainfall come to the region, making agriculture logistically unsustainable and making it harder for new forest to grow back. There is actually surprisingly little economic benefit for clearing the forest for pastoral fields, despite what many might think, and as more of the forest is destroyed, the land becomes overall less productive. Interestingly, according to a study, if left intact, a single hectare of the forest could produce a revenue of up to $6,800 a year if it's sustainably harvested for the fruit and down timber, compared to only $1,000 per hectare if it's cleared for commercial timber, and only $148 if the land is cleared for cattle pastures, which is what 90% of the forest is being cleared for. Currently, only around 1,730,000 square kilometers are protected, which is roughly the same size as the entire Congo rainforest, but less than half of the Amazon's total area. Fortunately, people are beginning to recognize that maybe protecting the world's most important ecosystem is a good idea, and conserved land is increasing fast, while deforestation rates have dropped to only around 5,000 square kilometers a year, from a high of 27,000 in 2004. Someday, hopefully soon, we'll get those numbers down to 0, or even better, begin replanting and restoring parts of the Amazon that have already been destroyed. As it stands now, however, the Amazon is still the largest forest on Earth, measuring up to 5,500,000 square kilometers. That's roughly the same size as the entire United States, including Alaska. In all, the Amazon rainforest represents more than half of the world's remaining rainforest, and remains a stronghold of wilderness in this rapidly developing world.
Mau Forest Complex Water Tower. According to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the total population of Kenya has increased from 38.6 million in 2009 to 47.6 million people in 2019. This means that the demand for water is higher than ever before. There are 5 major water towers in the country, namely Aberdare Range, Cherangani Hills, Mount Elgon, Mount Kenya, and Mau Forest Complex. Other critical water towers are Chulu Hills, Huri Hills, Kirisia Hills, Loita Hills, Matthews Range, Marmanet Forest, Mount Kipipiri, Mount Kulal, Mount Marsabit, Mount Njiru, Ndotos, Nyambene Hills, and Shimba Hills. Mau Forest Complex Water Tower is the most important water tower in Kenya that supports millions of livelihoods nationally, regionally, as well as internationally. It covers an area of 455,000 hectares and is as large as the forest of Mount Kenya and the Aberdare Range combined. The water tower comprises 22 forest blocks stretching across 6 counties, namely Baringo, Bomet, Kericho, Nakuru, Narok, and Uasin Gishu. The water tower is a major catchment for 13 major rivers, namely Amalo, Ewasongiro, Makalia, Mara, Molo, Mumberes, Naishi, Nderit, Njoro, Nzoia, Nyando, Sondu, and Yala. The rivers feed into 5 major lakes in Kenya and across the borders. These are Lake Baringo, Lake Nakuru, Lake Netron, Lake Turkana, and Lake Victoria. The water tower is also the source of River Nile that drains into Mediterranean Sea through Uganda, South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt, making it a lifeline to millions of people in the region. Mau Forest Complex Water Tower breathes life into the Masai Mara and Serengeti National Reserves. The major wildebeest migration across Mara River, dubbed the 8th wonder of the world, greatly depends on water from the Mau Complex Water Tower. The annual scenic event is classified by UNESCO World Heritage as one of the most impressive nature spectacles in the world. The water tower and its ecosystem contributes immensely to Kenya's economic development through tourism, agriculture, pastoralism, biodiversity, and hydroelectric power generation. On 15th January 2020, Kenya received great news from the United Kingdom government that the Mau Forest Complex Water Tower had been admitted to the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy, QCC. The admission means that the largest water tower in East Africa will be part of the highly conserved forests like the Great Bear Forest in Canada, Arboretum of Ruhande in Rwanda, and Kawari Forest Reserve in Nigeria. Except the Masai Mau Water Tower that is registered as a trust land under the Trust Lands Act, the other 21 blocks in the complex are gazetted as forests. The entire Mau complex is listed as a critical water tower under the Kenya Water Towers Agency Order of 20th April 2012. Some of the threats facing the water tower are encroachments, illegal charcoal production, illegal logging. The impact of these human-induced degradations has been catastrophic, with reduced river flows, frequent floods, prolonged droughts, food shortage, poor land productivity, conflict over resource including water and pasture, among others. Reclamation. The government of Kenya has put in place an ambitious plan to reclaim and restore the Mau Complex Water Tower. In 2009, the government recovered 19,000 hectares in southwest Mau Water Tower. The people who voluntarily moved out of the water tower were resettled in Chemusian, Baringo County, while others were paid 400,000 shillings to buy lands elsewhere. In 2018, under Phase 1 reclamation exercise, 4,500 hectares of forest land in Masai Mau was recovered. In 2019, under Phase 2 reclamation, the government recovered 17,101 hectares that comprised Kamwengoi, Sierra Leone, and Kipchoge. Therefore, the government has reclaimed a total of 40,000 hectares in 10 years. Restoration. Kenya Water Towers Agency plans to put up an electric fence covering 119 kilometers from Sierra Leone to Olokurto. However, the agency will initially fence off Sierra Leone to Nkareta, a distance of 50 kilometers. The intermediate fence is aimed at preventing future encroachments into the water tower. 10 million tree program. The government on 1st November 2019 launched an ambitious tree planting initiative aimed at planting 10 million indigenous trees on the areas recovered in Masai Mau. This is a multi-agency initiative driven by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry.
And today we are with Dr. Jonathan Muriuki, who is the country representative for Kenya ICRAF, and will be telling us more about deforestation and its disastrous effects. Dr. Jonathan, welcome to Get It Right.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so let's start by knowing who Dr. Jonathan is.
So my name is Jonathan, as has been said. I have studied forestry in my first degree and then gone on to study agroforestry in other degrees. But I also work now with farmers and partners in government and NGOs to promote agroforestry, which helps with the stemming deforestation.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start by knowing what deforestation is really all about.
Deforestation is when a certain parcel of land that is known as a forest is cut and changed into another land use, either to become an agricultural land or to become a settlement land. So people are settled there to live there. And it is no longer a forest in the sense that there are no more trees and the associated components that come with trees.
Okay, but when trees are cleared for agricultural expansion, we still depend on agriculture, for food security and all that. So how wrong is that?
Well, the truth is that agriculture depends on forestry for very many things. For example, water that is collected in the forest ecosystem comes into agriculture through various flows, either through the river or through the ground, and then supplies the crops. At the same time, we are able to get clean air from the forest and various other things, including fertility from the forest. And therefore, the more you reduce forests, the less agriculture is likely to be sustainable. At the beginning, it might look good, but as time goes on and on and on, you suddenly realize that it can't work anymore.
Okay.
You need the trees back.
Okay. So what contributes to land degradation?
Land degradation, there are two ways you can talk about land degradation. Land degradation in agricultural land is when you're not able to produce anything out of the land anymore. There is also what we call forest degradation, which is removal of trees or certain components of the forest. So the forest land is still called forest land, but it is not able to provide the services to humanity that it would have done if it was in its high quality status.
Okay, let's tackle the elements that really robs the soil its nutrients, declaring it infertile.
Yes.
What are these elements?
One of them is the utilization of the nutrients, in that the plants that have been planted in the soil have taken up the nutrients, and there is no replenishment, so the farmers are not bringing back nutrients through manuring or putting in fertilizer, and therefore you mine all the nutrients, and then you're left with nothing remaining from the original material. The other element, which is the most serious, is soil erosion, because soil erosion cleans away the topsoil. It goes into the water systems where all the nutrients go and actually destroy the water systems, and it leaves the subsoil layer, which is not very good with nutrients, and therefore the land is infertile.
And what extent of land degradation is there here in Kenya right now?
Actually, about 75% of the land in Kenya is degraded in various forms. And whether it is the ledgelands, or it is a croplands, or it is a forest land. It is a huge degradation level that is taking us into what we call desertification in the arid lands. Desertification is when the land is completely degraded that it cannot be brought back into productivity. So a minimum of 75% of the land is degraded.
And how can that be rectified? Since 75% is quite a huge area, how can that be rectified?
Of course, I am a tree person, and I
Yes.
think one of the things, to speak the truth, is that the tree is among the easiest ways to bring back the productivity of the land. Because the tree does not depend on the soil, only the topsoil. It is able to dig out nutrients from below ground and pump them back onto the topsoil. The tree is also able to withstand erosion in various ways by blocking wind erosion, but also being able to let water seep into the deeper layers of the soil, and therefore it makes the speed of erosion to be less. But when the land has been completely degraded, and it is coming to some things like what we call gullies and other rills that make water flow very fast,
Yes.
you have to do a few other mechanical measures like gully restoration, digging terraces, to ensure that there is no drop that is going away with the soil. Yes.
And do people really understand this? Because why do we still have people clearing trees? And if these are the effects which are really, really not good for us as a nation and even for our development?
I think it depends on who has been speaking to the people and what message has been coming to the people. The past has involved various sectoral conversations.
Yes.
So the person who is talking about crops only comes to speak about crops. The person who is speaking about trees only comes to speak about the trees and the benefits of
Yes.
trees, never says there are any negative effects of the trees. The crop guy is saying about the negative effects of the trees. The person talking about the livestock is only talking about the livestock, does not say that livestock is tumbling on the land.
Yes.
But when people start hearing from an integrated conversation, then people are likely to get it right. However, farmers actually are very good with the ecology. They understand the agroecology. They are good at ignoring some of the so-called experts and
Yes.
doing the right practices. What we need as to experts is to build on that knowledge and bring in a bit of scientific facts that can make farmers promote what they are doing at larger scale. Yes.
Okay, let's discuss greenhouse. Is it greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes.
What is all this about, and how is it related to deforestation?
Oh, that's a very good question. So greenhouse gases are some gases that are in the atmosphere, and the main ones are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide, and methane, which they accumulate in the atmosphere, and therefore they make the wavelengths of the sun. The sun comes down in what we call the short wavelength, and then it's reflected in long wavelength. That long wavelength cannot pass through the crown of the greenhouse gases, and that is what warms up the environment. So the more you accumulate gases in the atmosphere, the more the long wavelength of the sun remains with us, and it causes heating. So we call them greenhouse gases because they produce what we call the greenhouse effect. You know the greenhouses that are being produced in the farms?
Yes.
You accumulate heat because the wavelengths cannot go back, and so the atmosphere gets warmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the solutions now we are doing as a country, or let's talk even about your organization? What are some of these policies maybe you're setting up just to see that this problem is countered?
I think we begin with the country and say that the country is part of the global conversation, beginning with the agreements on climate change that we did in 2015 at Paris, that has allowed every country to prepare what we call a nationally determined contribution to reducing greenhouse emissions. And so every country is producing what we call national adaptation and mitigation plan that they can submit as a commitment. And so the Kenya has actually submitted a nationally determined contribution plan to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases. As our organization, our research is on agroforestry, and therefore our work is to show how farmers can benefit by having trees on farms so that they get some what we call personal benefits, and the mitigation to climate change becomes a core benefit. Because it is not individual, and therefore I do not have to invest for the society. I need to gain some personal benefits, and then the society gets a core benefit.
Okay.
And so our research is based on what can farmers gain, and then we move from the farmer level to the landscape level to the country level, including what kind of policies need to be changed to enhance farmers' adoption.
And when we are talking about the trees that need to be planted, are people informed about the species that they are supposed to plant? Because I believe there are those that will be more helpful to the, when it comes to soil rehabilitating back the soil and all that.
Yes.
And there are also others which have their negative effects. So how do you go about that?
So the species that farmers need to plant, one of them is that they need to be agroecologically adoptable.
Yes.
So they are good for that area. And usually those are the ones that are indigenous to that area. And the other ones that I introduced also need to be, we look at where we are introducing them from, and now that area is similar to the area we are introducing them to, and now they are likely to affect other plants, because some trees actually come and destroy the ecosystem, which is something, they are called invasive species, and I can give a few examples later. But that is something that we try a lot. So some of the work that we're trying to do is to do research to ensure that the invisibility of a species, so that we can control how it moves around, some of the benefits from trees that are introduced, and how they can fit in a certain geography, and then incorporate that into what we call the ecological knowledge in the community, so that we build on that. Unless farmers have a culture of planting trees, it becomes difficult to introduce this, especially to farmers who think that the trees have got detrimental effects.
Does deforestation has any effect on aquatic ecosystem?
Yes, a lot of them. Now, think about the forest as a sponge. And when the rains come, the water sinks into the forest, and it is released slowly as clean water. And therefore, the ecosystem in the water bodies, whether it is the lakes or the sea, is used to some bit of a certain level of water. And then you come and destroy the forest, and most of that water now, instead of sinking, it flows off as runoff, more runoff than should have happened. It comes picking soil from the agricultural lands, including the fertilizer and all the polluting agents that are there. And all that is put into the sea, into the lakes, including the plastics. It enhances the pollution of the water bodies, which of course you've seen the effects, sharks dying and fish stock dying. And also you start getting other plants growing because of the nutrients that have come into there that choke the living environment.
And do we have this under control?
There are many ways you can control this. One of them is making sure water does not gain speed. So at every stage as you're coming along the slope, you need to have structures that block the speed of water. And always make sure that water is getting into the soil and it becomes discharged slowly. When water is not discharged slowly, also the other effect is that the streams dry up, because they always get the water from the discharge from the soil rather than from the runoff. So as long as farmers, first of all, are terracing their land so that no runoff is coming out of their land, they are planting trees, which is going to enhance a bit of the water infiltration, then that can get under control. Unfortunately, most of the land is still not under management, especially land that has been bought by what we call absentee landlords. They are just banking on the land, and they don't manage it. So that causes areas where there is water velocity, which means even the smallholder farmer who is trying to do some structures, by the time the water comes into his land, it's already too bad and the structures are destroyed.
Okay. Okay, so the other thing I want us to discuss, when we look at other reasons which have led to deforestation, we are looking at logging, we are looking at livestock ranching. So we will want to see the alternatives that are being offered, because if you're discouraging deforestation, again, we still need to have an alternative. But before that, we will be taking a short break, but don't go too far. Welcome back to Get It Right. Today with us is Dr. Jonathan Muriuki, who is the country representative for Kenya ICRAF, who is telling us more about deforestation and its disastrous effects. Dr. Jonathan, before we went for our break, we were talking about livestock ranching and logging, some of the reasons why we've encountered deforestation. Yes, what is the alternative now to mitigating this?
I think one of the things that is causing deforestation is demand for wood products more than actually livestock ranching. Because we have 4 categories of wood products that are leading deforestation. One of them are timber products, and they are lucrative trend, including globally. Then we have charcoal and associated firewood, because at least 80% of the country population depends on firewood one way or another, either as charcoal or firewood. And then there is also the poles and construction materials that people have to utilize for that. So that is the main leading cause of deforestation. Livestock ranching is not necessarily a cause of deforestation, because you can easily do trees and livestock very well as long as you have the right approaches to do that. And especially what we talk about is controlling to ensure you have carrying capacity, the right monitoring so that you do not degrade. Grass and trees grow very well together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what contributes most to deforestation and forest degradation here in Kenya?
It is about wood products. So we have got 2 categories of forests. Okay, they could be more, because you have the forest in the highlands, which are the forests that are really known and the ones that have a lot of political issues.
Yeah.
Then you have the dryland forest, which for a long, long time were not being categorized as forests, were just being called woodlands. And then you have the coastal forests, the mangroves. So the highland forests are the ones that have got very good quality timber. And those ones, it is timber that causes deforestation over there. The dryland forests are the best sources of charcoal. So firewood and charcoal are the causes of deforestation there. While in the mangroves at the coast, it's basically construction industry.
So agriculture is very important for human survival, and also it's been considered as 80% direct driver for deforestation. What is your take on that?
So agriculture as a driver for deforestation is based on the traditional methods of farming, which were called shifting cultivation. So farmers would cut a small portion, grow their crops, then go to the next portion and leave this land to regenerate, what we call fallowing. Fortunately, the populations were low that time. The global population in the last 250 years has moved from 1 billion people to 8 billion people now. So it is no longer possible to do shifting cultivation, and farmers have to stay on the same piece of land for long. However, there are many methods of ensuring that you do not lose fertility and you can practice sustainable agriculture on the same plot of land, which means then that we can close some forests, which we call land sparing, and they remain as forests all the time, where we have what we call intensified agriculture, including incorporation of trees in those portions of land. And agriculture can then produce wood material, while at the same time producing enough food for feeding the populations. As it were, currently we have about 5 tons per hectare yield gaps in the high potential areas in this country, because farmers are not doing intensive agriculture as should be. So we can intensify the land that is already cultivated now and not cut more forests.
Okay. So Dr. Jonathan, maybe you can tell us more about the key components of this protection law, forest protection laws.
Talking about the key components, you got to look at what is flowing in there. For example, the Forest Act looks at protecting what we call the natural forests. Natural forests are forests that have not been interfered with. It is indigenous species that are growing there, and we've not cut them out and transformed them into plantations for timber production. Those ones are supposed to be protected under the Forest Act, but it's also the Kenya Water Towers Act, and there's also the Environmental Coordination and Management Act. The forests are supposed to be maintained as intact, and where they have been destroyed, to be allowed to grow back naturally. And the Kenya Forest Service is responsible for that. However, the Wildlife Act also looks at the forests where wildlife is a key component. For example, the Mount Kenya National Park is a forest, but then it has a huge wildlife base that Kenya Wildlife Service is interested in. There is also the Community Land Act. The Community Land Act looks at the land which communities take them as their land. It is not divided into individual possessions and given land titles, but it's managed by the community institutions at the institutional level. It allows any conversion of that land to only be determined by the community, led by the county in discussions with the county. Now, also the Agriculture Act now has got what we call the Farm Forestry Regulations, which were revised also in 2016, which says that farmers should have at least 10% of their land covered by trees. We need to break down that a bit to show what that 10% means.
So how does deforestation affect crop production?
There are many ways in which deforestation affects crop production, but the main one, which I have just mentioned in relation to biodiversity, is the whole issue of pollination. And what we are seeing is that because of the loss of various nectar-producing trees, bees are moving from some environments into others. And deforestation is one of the main reasons that that's affecting. There are some trees that are, and also herbaceous plants, that are good in terms of nectar production than others. So once those trees have been eliminated, then the bees do not have food for themselves, and therefore they have to move into areas where they can find food for themselves, because nectar is their food. So the more the forests are moved away from the agricultural landscapes, then the more the bees move away, and especially when there is no water for the bees. Yeah, so pollination, when the pollinators are affected, that's a major way in which production is affected, in addition now to the issues of soil fertility.
Maybe you can tell us some of the species that farmers should consider planting, tree species.
I think because we are coming from a deforestation conversation, there are quite a number of them. Eucalyptus is a major one,
Yes.
although as we have said, you need to plant it away from water streams because of it. It's a very thirsty tree species. We have others like Casuarina. We have, it's called whistling pine. It mainly grows at the coast, but also grows in the semi-arid lands. We have others like Graveria robusta. It is growing very much in Mount Kenya area. If you go to Meru, we almost have every farm covered by that, and quite a number of others that are producing wood. But then there are a few others that produce other utilities, like fodder for livestock. We have a species called Cariandra that came from Mexico, others called Lucinas, and other trees that are also grown for firewood. So especially in the dry areas, the acacias, the terminarias are trees you can grow for firewood.
Okay.
But because you need to have specific trees for specific areas, our organization has produced an app called Africa Tree Species Finder. Wherever you're standing on the Google platform, you can download it from the Google platform, and then it will be able to tell you where you are, what trees you can grow for what purposes in that area. And anybody with an Android phone can get that one. It's a free app for farmers to use. Yeah.
That sounds very interesting.
Yes.
So let's look at the role of deforestation when it comes to climate change.
A good question there, because cutting of trees are the only known carbon sinks.
Yes.
Carbon dioxide is among the biggest greenhouse gases, as explained earlier, and trees are the only organism that utilize carbon dioxide to make energy and food. And therefore, when we cut the trees, all that carbon that is held in the tree, because most of the tree is carbon, just goes back to the air. This is what we call carbon flux. We want all the carbon in the soil and less in the atmosphere. But when we release more and more carbon in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, then we get global warming, which contributes to climate change.
Okay.
Yes.
So how do trees and forests relate to the entire climate change issue?
I think the question is two-way. Trees get affected by, and forests get affected by climate change. For example, when it warms up, we get more pests that affect trees.
Yes.
It also gets very hot, and so it is easy to catch forest fires. And forest fires are a big destructor of forests, contributing to forest degradation. So trees themselves and forests are affected by climate change. But forests are the only known ways to mitigate climate change. And therefore, the more forests we can get back, especially the natural forests, then the less we can get of global warming. Yeah.
So we talked a bit about greenhouse gas emission.
Yes.
So what is the relationship between deforestation and greenhouse gases?
As I have said, when deforestation happens, trees are cut. Either they are burned so that we create agriculture, or they are burnt as charcoal. But anything that allows those trees to convert back to carbon dioxide is contributing to greenhouse gases. Because carbon dioxide is the biggest greenhouse gas. Therefore, deforestation, all the standing trees are actually carbon. Once they are converted, they become carbon dioxide, it goes to the air.
All right.
So when you deforest an area, for example, equivalent to Nairobi County, those are tons and tons of carbon going back to the air. And that's more greenhouse gases, that's more heat for you.
Okay. So Dr. Jonathan, some parts of this country experience floods whenever we happen to have heavy rainfall.
Yes.
So can we blame that on deforestation?
Well, not entirely, but it takes a huge, huge part of the blame.
Okay.
So when it rains, it floods, and then the water is not stored well enough to sustain a river ecosystem. So we can blame it very much on the deforestation, and MAU has a big role to play about that.
And there is this initiative by the government to see that by the year 2022,
Yes.
every county across the country has planted around 1 million trees.
Yes.
So what is being done about this?
A lot is being done. First is to say it's an easy target to achieve. That would be 47 millions. But we need the political will. This initiative was led by the Prime Minister himself. He was out there planting. The cabinet was out there planting. And when the conversation is owned by everyone, then it is possible to do that. What are the processes that make sure that the trees that are planted then grow to become useful trees? And that's a conversation we are doing. As our organization, we have a project called Regreening Africa, which is done in 8 countries, but Kenya is one of the countries where we're looking at the policies to ensure the conversation brings everybody together to plan together. And the other thing we are doing with the Ministry of Agriculture is to come up with an agroforestry strategy that will lead the counties and develop action plans that will take us there. I am very confident that we can reach this target by 2022.
So Dr. Jonathan, as I was saying, there is something you've mentioned that is really great. You know, just not focusing on planting trees, but rather growing the trees.
Yeah.
And now as we wind up our program for today, what is your parting shot?
My parting shot would be like, we need to make painful decisions in this country because deforestation itself is painful. And if we take the painful decision of saying, move timber production out of gazetted forest and take them into agricultural land, we'll be able to have this conversation about deforestation coming to an end. Yes. Otherwise, it will be an iterative cycle that does not achieve any means. So let everyone, the farmers, the government, the media, the NGOs, the policymakers come together and say, we need to put this to an end. Otherwise, we are losing our country. Thank you so much.
There you have it, brilliant ideas from Dr. Jonathan on how we can be able to mitigate deforestation. That is all we had for you today. Until next time, it's bye-bye for now.
Forests cover about 30% of the planet, and the ecosystems they create play an essential role in supporting life on Earth. But deforestation is clearing Earth's forests on a massive scale, and at the current rate of destruction, the world's rainforests could completely disappear within 100 years. Why should we care about deforestation? Together, forestry and agriculture are responsible for 24% of greenhouse gas emissions, making deforestation a significant contributor to climate change. Deforestation impacts the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in 2 ways. First, when trees are felled, they release the carbon they are storing into the atmosphere. Second, trees play a critical role in absorbing the greenhouse gases that fuel global warming. Fewer forests mean larger amounts of greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere, and increased speed and severity of global warming. In addition to helping regulate the Earth's climate, forests provide habitats for over 80% of the plants and animals that live on land. But deforestation destroys these habitats, diminishing biodiversity. Some estimate that 4,000 to 6,000 rainforest species go extinct each year. This also affects the more than 2 billion people who rely on forests as sources of food and shelter. The biggest driver of deforestation is agriculture. Farmers chop down trees in order to plant crops like soybeans, palm trees, and cocoa, or to make room to raise livestock for beef. Logging operations, which provide the world's wood and paper products, also cut countless trees each year. Forests are also destroyed as a result of growing urban sprawl as land is developed for dwellings. The effects of deforestation are grave, but not irreversible. Efforts such as managing forest resources, eliminating clear-cutting, and planting new trees to replace those removed are already being made to reduce deforestation's environmental impact on our planet. And while some plant and animal species are gone forever, combating deforestation can help prevent further loss of biodiversity.
Most of us have a special memory with trees. A childhood climb, or their shade on a sunny day. But we've taken trees for granted and cleared nearly half of our planet's forests. Luckily, forests have an extraordinary ability to recover. Across much of the globe lies a forest in the making. Just the slightest opportunity and trees reveal their magical ability to restore themselves and rewild the land, seemingly from nothing. This resilience stems from a need to survive and recover from the harshest conditions nature can throw at them. But forests have struggled to bounce back from us. Nothing takes down trees faster than humans. We're devastatingly efficient. In just 25 years, we've lost over 1 million square kilometers of forest. We're still clearing over 10 billion trees a year. Many of our ancient forests are gone, where the variety of life was most abundant and diverse. We've also lost the forest's guardians, the predators, who help ensure that plant eaters can't prevent the forest's return. But we need trees. Forests absorb carbon from our atmosphere and store it in their trunks, roots, and the soil. They remove almost 15 billion tons of carbon dioxide each year. As we clear and burn forests, we release dangerous amounts of carbon back into the atmosphere, increasing the rate of climate change. We need to reverse this and create a world of expanding forests once more. Luckily for us, the solution to how we restore the planet's forests is simple. We just need to give trees the opportunity to draw on their natural resilience. We can start by protecting those last remaining ancient forests. These precious places, undamaged by humans, still host their entire natural mix of species and trees, young and old. From here, plants and animals can radiate out to colonize new ground. These ancient places need to remain standing forever. Most of the other forests on our planet have experienced some human impacts. Yet they can still be healthy and wild. We can keep them this way whilst carefully extracting wood and other products and valuing them as they are. By managing them well, we can work with their natural resilience to keep them standing. It's a fact that our growing global population will need to use more wood. And that could be a good thing. Wood is an extraordinary renewable resource, and taking it from well-managed sources benefits forests and the planet. But on their own, natural forests can't provide all the wood that we need. So we also have to farm trees, just like we do other crops, and create a new generation of plantations. Plantations that allow wildlife to pass through natural forest corridors, that benefit local communities and economies, and that are planted on existing cleared land so they don't replace natural forests. Around the world, there are an estimated 2 billion hectares of degraded land where forests could be restored. That's twice the size of Europe. As we become more efficient farmers and adopt healthier diets, we'll free up land for plantations and for our forests to return, to rewild. Better farming, more forests. We can help nature to accelerate this global restoration. In many countries, people are planting millions of trees by hand. There are projects that deploy extraordinary technology to speed up the natural process. Even shooting seeds to rewild those hard-to-reach places. If we do all these things, just imagine our planet in the future. We'll have protected our amazing ancient forests. We'll be able to harvest all the timber we'll ever need. We'll have stabilized our climate. And we'll have more natural forests than any of us have ever known. The best thing of all, we can build a future where our cities will be filled with trees, giving us shade and cleaning the air. This will make us all healthier and happier. Because just seeing trees from a window or walking past trees on our way to work restores our minds and bodies. That's the magic of trees. And when you're in a forest, you can feel it. Go on, breathe.